says okay.
No.
All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Gilliland. We're giving the live feed always a second to connect to Facebook and Periscope on Twitter. I'm one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. With me is Nori Ealing, Courts, and Steve Chu, who is an assistant U.S. attorney, and he has company. Steve, who's with you this evening?
Who is with me? I have my two boys. What are your names?
Brandon
and Cameron.
Brandon and Cameron wanted to join us because they are fans of Star Trek Lower Decks. Right, guys?
Yeah.
As it should be. So, Brandon, what do you like about Lower Decks?
I just like that they just go on weird things and do stuff that they probably shouldn't do.
Yeah, people doing stuff they shouldn't do?
Yes.
Okay.
I think you might be in trouble there, Steve.
Maybe.
And Cameron, how about you? What do you enjoy about it?
The people who seem to be the bad guys are never actually the bad guys. It's just kind of whack.
It's kind of like, what show is it in space?
What?
Remember? You compared it to another show that you like?
What could it be? Now, the security officer does refer to people as Little Bear, so I find that entertaining with you guys.
Oh, our nickname, yeah.
Excellent. Well, we want to hear from you guys and what you like. And Brandon, who's your favorite character?
Honestly, I don't know.
Can't choose just one?
Yeah.
How about you, Cameron?
Boimler, probably.
Like Boimler? Yeah, Boimler gets in a lot of trouble, though, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
He's weird?
Yeah.
What do you
I
think?
think they're all kind of weird. I don't know if that's a distinguishing criteria.
Do you like Mariner?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Why?
She's kind of a big sister to him or something.
Kind of.
She gets him in trouble a lot, though, right?
Yeah.
So what did you guys think of this episode, Veritas?
Kind of weird. Because, it's he's it looks like a trial, but it turns out to be a party. It's just, totally weird.
So, what did you think, Dan?
Well, I noticed that they were wearing party hats when the lights were turned on. When the lights were off, you couldn't actually see them, which was weird because there also was a source of light in there. So you probably should have been able to see them.
So if the light was on, then there'd be no confusion, right? Then they would know it's not a trial.
But, why'd they kidnap them in the first place? Why couldn't they have just been hey, we need to do this, so we are invited to this party.
Yeah, it didn't feel like any party we've ever been to, right?
Yeah.
Who kidnaps their party guests?
Yeah.
Who would do that?
What if it's their alien culture that when you have a party, you're supposed to kidnap the people that you want to come to your party? Would that explain it?
Well, that'd just be weird, because...
All you have to do is kidnap somebody, just throw a sack over their heads and get them in the car and just drive away.
It's
The fact you know that is disturbing.
Yeah, I know. This is a little too much TV, guys.
The level of detail and thought is upsetting.
Yeah, a little too much Minecraft and some of that stuff. But were you guys?
Minecraft's clean.
That's true. Were you surprised that it was not a trial?
Kind of, because they were
I think. Well, it kind of was surprised, but I wonder why there was a literal metal gavel there.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
And why were they they're in this ground area and everybody was elevated above them in these kind of these what do they call it? Okay.
Chairs?
No, things that like a balcony kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of weird because they're all looking down on them, which is just kind of
Like the pit of judgment or something.
And I
Huh?
wonder why they also said that they had to testify.
Yeah.
That is very weird because it's actually a party. Why would they have to testify?
Because you also testify in church. Testify can mean multiple things.
Testimony can mean different things in different contexts. Yeah. This didn't really feel like a church though, huh?
Yes.
I like this alien trial.
Mm.
At least certainly not any church I'm familiar with.
Yeah. Or some kind of a party place too. You guys have been to a lot of these party places, right? Bounce houses, trampolines, little places.
Yeah, we've been to multiple places.
Never have I ever seen a place with a giant pit of eels and people looking over you.
Yeah.
The eels, yeah, was that weird? The eels?
Why do they just boil the eels?
Boil the eels?
Yeah.
They put the eels in
Like
boiling
somebody's trying to
water.
make
It's like killing them twice. What's the point of that?
eel soup or something. Somebody making that in the room.
Doesn't seem like a fun
while
party.
An entire party is going on.
Would you want to go to this party?
Nah.
No.
Probably not.
No.
I mean, it'd be weird if my friend kidnapped me for like a party. Am I supposed to bring a gift and I like totally disrespect it?
Oh yeah, there's a penny in your pocket.
That seems like a good excuse not to bring a gift, though. Is like I would have bought one, except you didn't tell me there was a party, and instead you put a sack over my head.
There was a phenomenon in the 90s when I was in high school, the early days, of somebody's birthday. They would get kidnapped really early in the morning. And in theory, they would go out to breakfast or just get shot with squirt guns and driven in the back of a convertible that was a VW Rabbit. But I don't have too many memories that I want to talk about. But yeah, that could totally happen to somebody.
Sounds almost like hazing or the old spanking machine or whatever.
Yeah.
Those old rites of passage.
Yeah. Would you guys rather go to a Klingon party? Because they seem to know how to have a good time with lots of food.
I don't know. Probably not.
Never been to a party before.
Yeah, well, when you go to Comic-Con, you might see some Klingon parties. All right, I think.
Seriously considered trying to do a Klingon wedding someday.
Oh, wow. That would be fun to see.
The real dress for the bride would be entertaining. So,
yeah. All right, boys. Why don't we let you guys go? It's almost bedtime. Can you say goodbye to everyone here?
Bye.
Good night,
Bye.
gentlemen.
Good night, guys.
Close the door. Thank you. Okay. So, a different perspective.
Well, I was their age when I got into Star Trek, so good. You're raising them right. That's good. So
Also, I like it because it's weird and it's whack. Not totally inaccurate descriptions of Star Trek Lower Decks.
That's true.
It brings me joy, and I'm glad that they look forward to it.
So let's try to be respectful of everyone's time, especially Nari, who's on the East Coast here, and we'll jump into it. I think we kind of had a recap a little bit there of the episode. Veritas means truth, and here the Lower Decks crew is in a room which they say they think is a dungeon, and they do actually ask, can you give us some context here? They don't get any.
No.
From looking around the surroundings, I would tend to agree that it is a reasonable conclusion that they are being held in some kind of holding cell, dungeon, call it what you will. And then the crew, the Lower Decks crew, gets lifted up through an elevator into a large pit that really resembles the Klingon court in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. And we see the senior officers are suspended in a beam of some sort. Doesn't look too friendly, does it? And then we get different stories told of similar events, which calls back to sort of that famous Japanese movie, Rashomon, where you have a set of events and you visit those events from the perspectives of different witnesses, and they all tell a slightly different story, which is not unlike what you get at a trial, because everyone has their own subjective perception of what we like to think of as the truth. The point there really is that it's hard to find an objective truth, that really it's more of a subjective truth. the truth can matter, depending upon your point of view, right? So let's jump into this right away. At the very beginning, the Lower Decks crew seems to be taken against their will. Are there issues here just right off the bat?
Yeah, it's kidnapping and false imprisonment out of the gate. It's now, so kidnapping is if somebody's forcibly taken and there's either fear or they're held or they're detained. That's and they're moved like to another county. That's kidnapping. Well, they're moved from their ship to another planet and they have no idea where they are. Kidnapping and false imprisonment is the unlawful violation of the personal liberty of another, and throwing them into what looks like a dungeon.
A party dungeon?
We later find out, yes.
Does it change the analysis at all that they're being kidnapped for fun, playful purposes?
That is a great question. Just as Josh mentioned, the birthday ritual, you kidnap the birthday boy. It can happen on, before weddings. There are traditions of bride raiding,
I thought I was joking, but Steve, you're totally right. There are real examples of this.
There really are. Yeah, it's, it happens. Yeah, so who knows?
It's 5 a.m. and you're asleep, and then your brother and two of your buddies attack you in the middle of the night and you have to fight them. Yeah, it happens.
Or if they throw you in the back seat of a car and say, hey, we're going to Vegas and, we'll be back in like 3 or 4 days, just like The Hangover, right?
I think the key distinction here would be, right, like how much they actually have to force you to go to Vegas.
True, right.
Like, get in the car, man, we're going to Vegas. Okay, I guess I'll do it. Versus handcuffs, shove you in the car. God, let me get out. I have to go to work tomorrow.
Are you in the trunk or the back seat? Yeah, they're
right. Exactly. They slip something in your drink and you wake up and you're in Vegas. Like, whoa, Yeah.
I had a hearing. Yeah, like none of that's good. No. I want to add, this follows the proud tradition that every Star Trek series has a trial episode. And, Discovery did in their opener, the pilot episode ends with the court-martial. So literally every series has a trial. And, this has elements of rules of engagement. It has elements of judgment. And there are references, specific references to other ones, and it's glorious. I don't know if the writers know of us or if they wrote this as a love letter. This was their way to get our attention, but you got it, and we love you.
Absolutely. This was an episode written for the legal geeks. I'm just gonna say.
It was
our bread and butter here. Definitely.
I love them.
So why don't we take the viewpoints one by one, sort of chronological order of the episode. So the first accounting we get is Ensign Mariner, who talks about her being up on the bridge, and she's present when the Cerritos makes contact with this Klingon ship Twerk on Stardate 57818.4. She was doing repair work. The ship's in red alert. There's an issue there because Rutherford messed with the red alert. They being the Lower Decks group, they don't know that the ship is on red alert. Then they open the doors and whoops. It's kind of hard to let this one go. Isn't that a concern here?
Yeah, it's kind of I don't know if it's dereliction of duty. There's got to be some subset of the UCMJ that gets into, you messed with the alarm system.
I'll just say again, if this was a failure to follow procedures, there are probably protocols in place to do things like messing with critical systems. Yeah. I'm guessing there were some procedures that weren't followed, but of course there are catch-all provisions in the UCMJ, including dereliction of duty and other things that, even if they don't think they can stick a specific charge, they could get him for this.
That and the fact that they're talking about Roga Danar, who got into a fisticuffs with Picard and kidnapped Crusher, and to comparing comparisons to Khan, it's just these writers love Star Trek, And that's very admirable with the level of deep cuts they tossed into this.
And we love them for it.
Yes.
Absolutely. And so, I think there is one important issue to point out here. It's that Rutherford, he's not messing with, say, just, whatever, the food replicator or the ice cream machine. This is the actual red alert system, which would appear to be a critical system. So, if something goes wrong with the ice cream machine, I mean, the ship doesn't fall apart, but if something goes wrong with the red alert system, I mean, that could be pretty bad news, and it looks like it is. We get up to the bridge now, and we get this really odd, and Star Trek does this so well, respecting and communicating with alien cultures. And then we get this whole piece where the captain beams back. She's like, wow, okay, she's got this map. Who gave them the map? Who are these aliens? They're not Klingons. They're some sort of bug aliens as they are described in the story. And the captain starts to say, oh, well, I meant to express my gratitude. Oh, gratitude, how dare you? And, oh, well, I guess we have different definitions of gratitude. And everything just keeps escalating more and more. And now, and this is maybe a good sign that this is truly a dream or a fabrication on the part of Mariner, the captain actually stops and asks everyone else for options rather than making a decision. And she asks Mariner. Mariner just says, oh, I think you know exactly what to do. Oh, that's right, I do. Okay, now what about you, Boimler? It's a safe place, no wrong answers. And of course, Boimler proceeds to give probably, what appears to be the only wrong answer. Is this unusual, though? The captain just suddenly kind of throwing down and say, okay, options. I mean, Picard and Kirk didn't seem to do that very often.
They did occasionally, and as did Janeway. So
Yes.
they do. All the captains that we've seen have asked for advice, whether it's in the ready room or on the bridge with, what. I mean, they never look unconfident while doing it. It's options, as opposed to like, oh crap.
I got nothing. Anyone else? Right?
Like that would destroy morale pretty quickly. You gotta, when you're asking for advice, it's like co-counsel. It's like, counsel, what do you think? As opposed to, I got nothing, Bob. Like we don't. But again, it's adorable, and the fact that Boimler and Mariner go to the bridge and they're like nav and the helm or tactical. Well, no, not tactical, but helm or navigation is fun for what they have to do.
Also, is one of the things that Boimler suggests, which is, of course, a wrong answer, a crazy Ivan? Isn't that a Firefly reference?
Yeah, it's Hunt for October, and it was a thing that the Russian submarines.
Okay.
I thought it was Red October, right?
Yeah. So what? Not to go too far off, but submarines can't hear directly behind them, so they occasionally turn, so that way they can check what's behind them and go back on course, and that was known as Crazy Ivans in Days of the Cold War, and probably still is because,
It's now known as baffling.
Yeah.
It's still also parens Crazy Ivan, but no, I also am fairly confident that this may have been another Easter egg for the diehard sci-fi fans out there, because it is a maneuver in an episode of Firefly, of the ship the Serenity, which also has a dual engine system. So the idea being, in order to execute a quick turn, in order to again look to see what's behind you, you reverse one engine while throttling the other forward.
Serenity.
So I think this was extra red meat just for us sci-fi geeks.
Well, most sci-fi fans are not just fans of one show. They like a lot of shows. And Serenity, written by the nerd sci-fi Jedi master Joss Whedon, is certainly up there. And it culminated in that one movie, too. So
yeah.
Yes.
One movie that tried to wrap it up.
So good that they almost brought the show back, except, spoiler alert, they had killed a bunch of characters.
Yeah, true. Back on task, though.
Sorry,
So
guys.
no. This is a purely fun hour of geekery here. So now we get into an interesting thing, and I always wonder about this as well. How do you govern communications on the bridge of a ship, particularly a starship this big? Is there a protocol for what people say, what they mean? There is training too about how when you report things to commanders, you have to be pretty objective, because if you report them in a certain way, you could be suggesting a certain course of action. Like you could say, okay, Captain, weapons ready, standing by. That's one way of saying, or you could say, Captain, weapons ready, all positions optimal now for attack, which now suggests, oh, we need to do it now, So the captain tells Mariner, send our friends a message, her exact words. Mariner interprets that to mean fire a shot across their bow, which she does, a literal phaser beam, and prompting the captain to say, are you crazy? I meant to invite them over for dinner. Okay, major miscommunication. Whose fault is this?
Okay, I'm gonna. Yeah. So, well, two things. The first is that if there isn't a clear procedure or protocol or norm, that the captain will not talk to you in innuendo.
Should not.
then, then that's a real serious problem of ship order. I think there is some problems here with Mariner assuming that the captain would be giving her an order in innuendo, but maybe this is actually more normal and Mariner isn't to blame. But you should not be assuming that the captain is telling you to fire when you hear anything other than let's fire a weapon.
I think you're right on that, Nari. I mean, there are very clear ROEs, rules of engagement whenever you're in any position where armed conflict is a possibility. So it's very clearly laid out when you are allowed to initiate some sort of aggression. And I think most people would think that the captain was not intending to fire weapons when she said send them a message. However, the captain's responsible, right? I mean, what do you think, Josh?
Yeah, she's responsible. And the send them a message. Okay, what's that supposed to mean? Now, I get Star Trek's long history of compromised communications, and they're saying things that it's a coded message. It's Wrath of Khan with and we'll have emergency power back in 2 days, as opposed to nonverbal communication with a nod, and which is a next gen episode.
Yes.
So proud history there. But that also implies you work together and you know each other. Now, with a mother-daughter relationship, you think that would exist. That you would know what they're thinking, and it's we because of all the stuff that we've done together at shows and everything, we have a little of that. When we do panels, that we could look at each other and know what the other's intending. But that was notably absent here. And it's really weird to go, that man invite him over for dinner? Huh?
And Nari, I don't know if you're making a reference to Tendi later in the episode saying, you did not martial arts all those people. Right, I did. I laughed so hard many times. I absolutely loved that part of the episode. Now, this whole issue of communication, we just got done with the captain saying gratitude, and then the other side saying gratitude, how dare you? If we want to get into another level of legal nerdery, I think we would start getting into statutory interpretation, where words typically have their own, their ordinary meaning, but apparently not in this situation. So are we in some sort of Darmok situation now, where we're communicating through images, metaphors, things like that?
Oh, that remains one of my favorite episodes.
Absolutely. Oh, very moving episode.
I don't think so, because this just seems to be a radically different culture that they're not communicating by analogy or reference. They just literally have a completely different value system. And maybe showing gratitude is a sign of weakness or an insult because they don't think it's sincere. again, something that we would not, understand. We would need to, analyze to go like, okay, so they're opposite. So like you have to come in hot and like yell at someone, and they like see that as a meaning of respect, like the Vulcan hello.
Yeah, right.
So there's something different there.
I was just going to, what you were saying, Josh, reminded me, though, of another episode we can reference here, which is the Ensigns of Command, which, yeah, is a radically different culture. It's one of the few times that there's an alien species in the show that is nothing like a humanoid. And so therefore those common points of reference and understanding are generally completely lacking. Although in that case, they actually rely therefore more heavily on formality. That species is obsessed with following the letter of the law of the treaty because there are none of these commonly understood things. So in this case, I would also say that when there's such a big disconnect between the culture that Captain Freeman is interacting with and our own, hopefully both parties in that instance would rely more heavily on literal meaning as opposed to sort of culturally understood meaning, which is going to completely disconnect.
Well, that, and you would want both sides to know, okay, they're totally different from us. We got to be really careful here and be aware of the cultural differences.
Not fire a shot across the bow? What?
Yeah.
I think protocol would not include firing a shot across the bow, typically.
And I want to say also, the part where she said, let's send them a message, I agree that alone seems a little weird. And Mariner acts pretty quickly after she said that. I think if she had waited just 2 more seconds, she would have followed up with, let's send them a message. Does anyone have a good dinner card?
Right. Or, if we want to take the analogy even further, I mean, maybe in some cultures, firing a phaser shot across the bow is an invitation to dinner. Who knows? I could imagine the Klingons might think that way,
Throwing heavy objects is an invitation for a date in Klingon, yes.
Yes, right. There's a lot of violence and sort of how much can you take type of contest there. We can get into another legal rabbit hole here, and that is, I was of this in some of the Next Gen episodes where we talk about admissibility now, because Mariner is essentially testifying, but she is now telling a story where she is describing things that other people said or did. Lawyers, people with legal training know that there are rules of evidence that dictate what can and cannot get into the record. Therefore, these are pieces of evidence that may or may not be considered by the trier of fact, whether that be the judge or the jury. One of the main hurdles, some of the initial hurdles, of course, relevance. It's got to be somewhat relevant. It's got to be somewhat reliable. Be what it is. But the hearsay hurdle is something that trips up a lot of attorneys. Do we want, hearsay itself occupies a lot of time in law school lectures, research, etc. Don't think we can do a deep dive here, but maybe just a quick sort of dip our toe in. Does either of you want to take a crack at it?
I can, because again, it's what I did instead of date while I was in law school. So hearsay is an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter asserted. We generally don't want to do that, but there are exceptions, and exceptions could be such as a present sense impression, or something like an excited utterance, or a statement against interest. There are ways that could come in, and the send them a message might fall under. It wouldn't be an excited utterance.
Effect on the listener, perhaps?
Effect on the listener, something to explain conduct that was thus taken. There could be a Hillman intent for, like, this was, we intended to do something. Like, granted, that's still kind of a coded message of send them a message, as opposed to, fire. But I again, that's the brief introduction of hearsay without going way into the weeds.
And I think it's very useful to ask in every case in every time in which you have an evidentiary issue, people tend to focus just number one on what the evidence is. And that's important, but you also have to look at the next step, which is what are you trying to use it for? So, the captain's statement, send them a message. If you're trying to use it to prove that she actually said this and she meant it and all that, you've got some problems potentially. But if you're using it to just show that the statement was made, Mariner heard it, effect upon the listener, that's why Mariner did what she did, now it's less of a problem because you're only offering it to show that Mariner was told something and reacted accordingly. Not that the captain actually meant, or that her meaning was literally send them a message or whatnot. More that a crew member was reacting to an order, regardless of what that order was.
In this instance, just to play the bug aliens council, I think it is being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted, because they seem, without fully understanding what's going on, Mariner and co, our heroes, believe that their senior officers are on trial, and so they would be attempting to show that there was not some kind of misconduct or crime that they committed. In this instance, firing, unprovoked at an alien craft might be considered wrongdoing. So the fact that she's saying the captain simply said, send them a message, and I being the mistaken junior officer that I am fired, it could be to prove the matter of the truth asserted.
You would have to have some limiting instructions, to show exactly what you're trying to do here. If there's a jury, I think it gets a little more dicey. With a judge, maybe it's a little more clear. But these are.
Oh, I was just gonna say, if I could just wax poetic for 1 second about why hearsay prohibition exists, because I think some people don't necessarily understand why, right? Like, why couldn't someone, if they witness somebody say something, just testify about that in court? And it's because, without getting into too long-winded an explanation, there are things that get lost in the translation when you are retelling something secondhand. And one of the most prototypical examples of this is the movie Presumed Innocent, in which Harrison Ford, being harassed by a friend in the hallway about what, who is intimating that he in fact murdered his wife, turns around and says sarcastically, "Yes, I killed my wife." Of course, this is relayed in court without that tone. He turned to me and said, "Yes, I killed my wife." This is why we have, it's not a hard and fast prohibition. It is full of exceptions. That's why the default rule is you can't bring it in because it's hearsay.
The bottom line on hearsay, people are concerned with reliability and, how strongly can we truly believe this? So if another way to think of it is, you're trying to bring in someone else's statement and trying to, for the truth of what it's asserting. And if that person's not available and you can't cross-examine them, how much can you really rely upon it? Because you could very well have someone say, "No, I was totally joking. In fact, I just, told several jokes to someone else and I turned around and said this." Well, now, it's not so reliable. But we don't know that if that person's not there to testify. Therefore, it would be unfair to have someone else say that they heard person one say that. That's sort of the, a lot of the logic there. So we probably dove a little deeper than we anticipated into that.
Sorry.
No. Nari, I'm trying to be respectful of your time difference here. But the tank of contempt, eels swimming around, as our two younger guests pointed out earlier. How do you have a party if you've got eels swimming around in what appears to be boiling water? We've got some issues jumping up here. What do you guys think?
Okay, so let's set aside the part where this could be an Eighth Amendment violation. It turns out that nobody actually gets hurt by being put in the tank of contempt, right? Like, I think at one point one of them exclaims, "I think I'm hurting the eels."
I'm hurting them.
But ordinarily, I think we might consider being put into a tank that appears to be full of boiling water and eels to be Eighth Amendment gilding the lily. But setting that aside, I actually think that this is a really interesting and illustration of the concept of contempt of court, which doesn't often come up, and a lot of people don't really understand what it is. So I would like to take this opportunity to explain it. So basically, there is a generally understood idea that courts do have the power to order people to do things, right? This is, of course, at the end of a trial or other court proceeding, they might issue orders, but also during a court proceeding, the judges have the power to compel certain types of behavior, and one of them might be compelling witness testimony. Another one might be compelling someone to turn over documents, things like that. And how does the court actually do that? It is with the threat of contempt, at least in the last instance, but it's technically always, lurking in the background that if you don't do what you're told at the end of the day, the court has the power to fine you or put you in jail even. Now, I think, Josh, you mentioned when we were spinning up before we started to record that there are at least 2 different types of contempt. Do you want to offer the definition, or I can also go straight into it?
No, you're doing great. Keep going.
Oh, okay, so basically the difference between there's a civil and criminal contempt of court. This is not exactly what it sounds like. It's not that civil contempt means you can only be fined and criminal means you can be put in jail. The best definition is this, in essence, that criminal is basically final. Civil means that the court has put you on notice. I'm going to put you in jail if you don't do this thing, or fine you if you don't do this thing. But you still have the opportunity to correct your behavior in order to avoid that. But once the court has decided that you have in fact committed contempt and I am now going to move forward with punishing you, it now becomes criminal contempt, and now you are afforded more rights like you would as a criminal. And technically the court has to make certain predicate findings before they can actually punish you. You're presumed innocent in that proceeding, and it can be challenged immediately because this is not a power that has gone completely without abuse throughout its history. However, I want to note one very important difference between that idea of contempt of court and the tank of contempt, which is, of course, that a judge wields that power. In this case, to the extent that we believed that this was a trial, I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head. Was it Cal? What was his name? The alien who was doing the questioning.
Oh, right. Yeah.
In any event, he appears to be playing the role of, let's say, prosecutor, right? Yeah. He is questioning the witnesses. It seems to be that he believes a crime has been committed. And at the same time, though, he is the one to order people to go into the tank of contempt. That is not how it works. If a prosecutor or just opposing counsel, believes that a witness is refusing to testify by refusing to answer their questions, they would have to appeal to the judge, who in this case was the person standing silently there, actually just waiting to set up for their daughter's birthday party. They would have to appeal to them and say, please, judge, this witness is refusing to testify, and the judge would step in and threaten contempt of court.
So I'm going to make an off-the-wall reference here. Josh is familiar with the Transformers movie. You will recognize this creature here.
Oh, whoa.
On Judge, who has a line in the 5 faces, including the face of death right there. And he says at one point to Hot Rod and Cup, silence or you will be held in contempt of court. And Hot Rod says, I have nothing but contempt for this court. And then they get thrown into the pit of Sharkticons, not eels, but Sharkticons. Anyways, you probably have not seen that movie, Nari, but it's the true Transformers movie, in my opinion, 1986 animated Transformers film. Contempt of court, I will say, is a very powerful remedy. And even in civil cases, one can obtain contempt charges against someone. And you
can land yourself in jail in a civil case in this circumstance.
I have seen that happen. I've seen people thrown in jail in a civil case for civil contempt. It is not something to be trifled with. So interesting points there. Moving along, because we could probably talk forever about that too, but we now get to, let's see, we are at the eels.
We've gone through Mariner, so why don't we kind of go lightning round through Rutherford and Tendi and Boimler, just because.
Absolutely. So Rutherford's on a Romulan secret mission. He's recruited for some sort of odd mission, and one of the interesting wrinkles is that his implant keeps getting reprogrammed or updating with new information. He keeps blacking out, and then it reboots, and you get this nice welcome back message. And when he wakes up, something's happened. He's done something that he cannot remember, and he has to look around. Oh, what did I do now? And we find that he's done some pretty amazing things. He's broken them into places. He's learned how to fly a ship. He's repairing things. This kind of feels a little bit like the Matrix, where, can you fly that? No, not yet. Oh, Tank, can you download me a piloting program for a Huey like 204? Okay, there we go. That type of thing. Pretty amazing. But this whole downloading information and blacking out, it leads to a question. I mean, is Rutherford responsible now for things that happen when he's sort of not there? I mean, what do you guys think?
Two things. One, if he was asked to do any illegal orders, he would have no duty to follow that. So if he was following lawful orders, there is no punishment for following a lawful order because he had to do that anyway. As to the reboot issue, the insanity defense requires you to not understand the wrongfulness of your actions. And if the cybernetic implant is constantly rebooting, causing him to black out and the chip takes over, he's not responsible. That's the short version.
Yeah, I'm going to agree that, literally being blacked out and under the control of a Vulcan implant is going to fit multiple definitions of the insanity defense. And also in general, literally not being conscious and some kind of conduct that you're doing is literally involuntary. It is not your doing. Also would tend to negate, I think, any crime that involves mens rea. And of course, most crimes involve mens rea. For our non-lawyer listeners, mens rea is basically some concept of intent. Now that can include knowledge, but it's basically some kind of mental state that is required to be proved as an element of the crime. And it has to be proved for you to be convicted of it. And almost every crime has that. There are a very limited number of strict liability crimes which do not involve mens rea. But this is why, for example, it's in the movies or TV shows, anytime somebody gets caught for drug possession, what's the first thing they say? I have no idea what this is. I've never seen this before in my life. Yeah.
I don't know how that got into my trunk. What are you talking about?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's because it's not, setting aside problems of how likely that is to persuade a jury. It's not as silly as it sounds. The reason why people say that is because if you can persuade someone that that's true, it negates the mens rea because you didn't have knowledge that it was there and you didn't intend to do the thing. Now, that's not the same as I intended to commit a crime. Mistake of law, I don't think almost ever works to negate mens rea, but mistake of fact, so you lacked the requisite knowledge, sure, that can work. And in this case, he literally has no mental state whatsoever.
So I just want to highlight that his scene is packed full of references to a whole bunch of things, from the bird of prey from Balance of Terror, or at least that class of ship.
Yes.
That the shuttle from Star Trek: The Motion Picture, the Vulcan shuttle.
Yes.
Vulcan nerve pinch, the Spock and Spock reference.
Yes.
The Vulcan Space Museum has the type of ship that landed in First Contact. Yes. There were other things like, hey, there's a Klingon D7 battle cruiser. Yes. So there was just tons of there. Gorn that we haven't seen since the arena.
The Gorn wedding, and someone was taking a photograph, and then suddenly they turn on. I don't suddenly get why they attack Rutherford, even at a wedding, but who knows?
Yeah, he had no idea while he was there. And, I might be missing one other one, but this was just full of references. Plus the character's adorable as waking up outside and having to get the engineer, who has hypoxia, back to the shuttle. Yeah, a lot of comedic value and exceptionally well done.
Yes.
Oh, the fan dance from Star Trek V.
Yes. Oh no, you're doing the fan dance. Wait, I'm totally distracted now.
It's this feels right.
And so allow me to play prosecutor for just a moment of Rutherford. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've heard all these smoke and mirrors about how this implant has negated his state of mind. He didn't know what he was doing, but he did know, or should have known, that this implant did leave him vulnerable and susceptible to being controlled. isn't his responsibility, therefore, to not have an implant, which thereby creates a security risk when he's in a vital position of importance on a starship?
No, that's not fair, because he was, like, he normally would only do downloads when he was asleep, because that's what causes the blackout. So if he goes to bed, like, it doesn't matter because he's asleep. He was ordered to update his files, and that was a lawful order. And because he followed the lawful order, that caused him to have his blackouts. So, like, none of that is his fault. And the fact that his superior officers might not have been as understanding of his needs, but they did look like they were in a hurry and they needed his help quickly. But I'm going to go with no. No, I will defend him.
So I mean, I'm with you, Josh. I also, Rutherford. I have no problem figuring out my favorite character, and it's still Rutherford. So I agree with you, Josh. But I think, Steve, what you might be getting at here is a little bit of a parallel to voluntary versus involuntary intoxication as a defense to a general intent crime. So, as I was saying, mens rea is typically an element for any crime, but there's a difference between general intent and specific intent. So, if someone has voluntarily intoxicated themselves and then as a result of that lacks the necessary mental intent for something in which they didn't have to intend to do this specific thing, they had to intend to do the conduct that resulted in it, then that would not actually cover as a defense a general intent mens rea. It would still usually work for specific. So if the idea is that you not only had to intend to do the thing, you had to intend to do the thing and cause the harm.
Intending the conduct versus intending the result. Yeah, right. So, there are, as always, the law leaves us with some gray areas and some wrinkles here. So Rutherford's story concludes essentially, and we then get to Tenby, who is sort of so far has been sort of the bright-eyed, excited to be here type of person, excited now about cleaning the briefing room. And a little bit odd, as my wife pointed out, why is she using a lint roller in the 24th century? Shouldn't there be some more modern invention at that point? To which I
better mousetrap. I mean, it's just
right. We put the technology into phasers and transporters and warp drives, but not into a simple, carrier of clothing, I suppose. I don't know.
Maybe that's still the best way to get fur off of something.
Yeah, the old ways.
Or maybe it's like polishing shoes. It's the act itself that builds character.
Right. We believe that technology, in Star Trek Insurrection, they say we believe that when you take away these tasks from the people, it takes something away from the people. So Tendi blocks out some of the information from her story. She says it's confidential, so she's going to leave out certain parts. Notably blocks out parts of the faces, really the eyes of the people, and then every time they say certain keywords, they're bleeped out as well. Tendi surprises, I think, a good number.
I just want to put key in scare quotes here. It appears to be random to me.
Yeah, that's true too. It's hard to tell if there's a method to the madness, if you will. I don't know. But Tendi goes on this Black Ops Section 31 type of mission. They're retrieving something, and they keep referring to her as the cleaner. And I don't think she expected to be part of this team, but she is. And then as the team runs out, from these double doors, they say, "Cleaner, do your thing." She's like, "My thing? It's my thing." And she just throws down like Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, Van Damme, all these guys just put into one, and takes down, I think, 5 or 6 Romulans. I think we were counting earlier. Pretty darn impressive. And this leads back to the point Nari and I were pointing out earlier when the Inquisitor is like, "Stop, you did not do martial arts on multiple Romulans." Right. I love that he still remains bright-eyed and all happy, even after just throwing down not something you would have expected from her.
She also has, I think, my favorite line with the prosecutor saying, you're willing to risk death, in order to not testify. And she says, yes, that is correct. It's like so adorable. The way she says it is just like, rock on, girl. so well delivered.
This is someone we want on our team, I think, right?
Oh, yes.
Totally. So it's a Black Ops mission. We're not supposed to know much about it. She reveals some information. I don't know if she reveals too much. Any issues, any thoughts here, guys?
We don't know the full scope of the confidentiality that she needed to maintain on what could be said or not said. There's also the fact that they're in the proceedings and she doesn't want what she thinks is her senior officers and friends to be killed. So, there could be a weird mistake of fact because, again, she thought death was on the line.
Right.
And
go ahead.
No, you first.
I was going to say it raises the interesting point of how a court deals with confidential information. We see that all the time with medical or financial information that is presented, or CIs, confidential informants in criminal cases. Minors also have to have their names and personal information protected. So typically, there are a couple of different ways to handle this. If it's filings, matters can be redacted, or they can be filed under seal, usually under some form of protective order. If we're talking about testimony in open court, judges can employ various methods there as well. They can close the courtroom so that only the people who are absolutely necessary to hear the testimony would be there, which is what they could do here as well.
I have a very short story just about that.
Yes,
specifically.
please.
Which is just that I was lucky enough to work on a trial after being an attorney for only a couple of years. In the Court of Federal Claims, it was a great opportunity. I was really excited. It was a case against a government agency, and it involved certain elements of counterintelligence. And so as a result, some of the proceedings were considered confidential by the government. We had a protective order. And during the trial, I, of course, wanted my boyfriend to come and see this trial in which I was involved in. And so he came for one of the days of testimony. At one point, after a couple hours of witness testimony, we needed to discuss portions that were sealed. And so the judge ordered the courtroom sealed. He actually looked around, and of course, this wasn't a super popular, well-known trial, so it was pretty much just my boyfriend in the audience. And so he asked, of course, is there anyone here who is not a party or a counsel to this case? And James was like, yep, that's me. I'll show myself out.
Yeah.
And then, once the courtroom is reopened, you got to come back in. So that's actually how this works. I think there is a popular misconception that just because something, even for, is classified or is important to national security, that it's not going to be adjudicated properly. And that's simply not true. There are ample procedures that courts have in order to both protect confidential or sensitive information, as well as fully and fairly adjudicate the matters before them.
And confidentiality is something that's taken very seriously, not only by the courts, but by the parties involved. Such are the rules, at least. So there's some interesting issues there, and we get now towards the end of the different accounts from the various witnesses, who are now all about to be thrown into the pit of eels, and Boimler makes this impassioned closing argument, and when I saw it, I thought, wow, where is this coming from? But he's speaking with passion, with eloquence. He said, whatever they did for good. He cites Drumhead, a terrific episode, which at the time was considered a low budget episode, but ended up being one of the very powerful episodes of Next Generation. And he says, this is, what kind of trial is this? And the Inquisitor said, what trial? What, you thought this was a trial? This is not a trial. And then they turn on the lights, and it's a party, even though it looks suspiciously similar to a trial. The Imperium Magistrate Klar is his name, and he talks about the beam of celebration and how they were actually here to celebrate and honor the command crew. Who's that judge? Oh, I don't know him. He's here to set up for a birthday later for his little girl. She's turning 100. And then the guy's like, oh yeah, hey, how's it going? And as they turn on the lights, everything looks totally different. There are balloons. It's very festive. Someone walks in and says, hey, your time is up. You paid for 22 minutes. As a side note, and I think many of the parents listening will totally relate to this, but this is absolutely how birthday parties work for little kids. You get in there, you have your little festivities, and you get out for the next party. And you have your play area, then you have your little party room area for the cutting of the cake and the presents, and then bang, bang, and you're gone. And, birthday parties, 1 to 2 hours windows, and they just keep moving you through, whether it's Chuck E. Cheese or some jump house place, bounce house, trampoline place, I certainly chuckled a little bit at that. Now, in our house, we were wondering, well, how did this, how did we go from a trial, an ominous-looking trial, to this little festive celebration? A clever ruse. I mean, these writers are very good at making you think one thing. Right after this, my eldest watched again the second or third episode, but remember the one where the first officer ends up engaging in that battle in the arena with that big tough guy who appears to not be very smart, but actually is very intelligent, and suggests that they do trials with judges and stuff. And again, just keeping you off your game. Very interesting. I mean, what did you guys think of the twist here at the end?
Nari?
I loved it. I mean, so I think, Steve, I think your sons had it right at the beginning that one of the things that's wonderful about Star Trek is it's a relatively safe assumption that things are not what they appear. The scary looking alien that seems like it's trying to eat the ship may in fact just be a lost child looking for a mom. And this happens over and over, and it is distinctly not true in a lot of other franchises. I think I've done podcasts recently with you guys where you've had to remind me that this is not Star Trek. In this franchise, the bad guys are in fact the bad guys. There's not something else going on here. But yeah, I think that, this is part of why I love The Lower Decks, is that is quintessentially Star Trek, that things are not what they seem, that you can't judge an unfamiliar alien culture by your own cultural references. And so this was a perfect episode for that.
And we're back to the Rashomon idea again, right? That,
exactly, which is also one of my favorite movies, just FYI.
Right. Don't just, don't assume, try to be objective. Josh, any thoughts? Did we lose Josh?
This was just a ton of fun. How about now?
Yes.
How about now?
Yes.
Am I back? Okay. This is just a ton of fun. They clearly love all of Star Trek. It's packed full of references, down to a Star Trek animated series reference with the giant Spock. That's like, wow. Like, that's... You go, boy. That's exceptionally well done. And again, the message of Star Trek, the person who appears as your enemy isn't always your enemy. On the flip side, don't date a salt monster. Like that's
good can also be bad in Star Trek.
But again, like this is like the second or third reference
to the salt monster. Yeah, that made an impression on these writers.
And so they keep doing that and going like, okay, let's do an obscure reference to Star Trek: The Motion Picture again, and it's like, wow, like you kids really spend a lot of time thinking about this. Clearly, love the source material. And like let's work in Romulan warbirds, and okay, go for it. Let's go back to Vulcan. Let's have the Vulcan priest type uniform. It's like, wow, they just keep doing that, and that's fun. So I love this because it's fun. Like we all have, everyone's under a ton of stress right now, and for all kinds of reasons that are happening, professional or, we watch the news. And this is a lovely escape. And it's just so much fun and so well made. and highlights the best of Star Trek. So they really, they all deserve a gold
I'd
star.
say that we are among our tribe, aren't we? We're watching these episodes. We know these are folks who love the same stuff we do, with as much passion and as much knowledge, if not more, than what we have, which is just terrific. And I would be remiss if I let us close without mentioning the amazing cameo by Q. John Delancey, and oh my God, we see him appear, and he turns the senior staff into this card chess match. Kind of, for some reason, it reminded me of History of the World, but I guess that says something about my lowbrow movie features, my wife would say. And then we see Q challenging the Lower Decks group to a duel, and he said, "So this is what I love, because this is the latest appearance we get of Q," and he says, "Oh, Picard, he's no fun. He's always quoting Shakespeare, and he's always making wine." I'm thinking, wow, there's a reference to the future for Picard. And I, like many fans, I'm hoping we see John Delancey return to the Picard show at some point. Up until now, I think the last line we had from Q in continuity in an episode was, "All good things," he said. "I'll see you. You'll find out. I'll see you out there, and if you're lucky, I may stop by." So Q apparently harasses other Starfleet vessels, not just the Enterprise. But what did you guys think of this?
Mari?
I absolutely love Delancey. I love Q. And he definitely does harass other vessels besides the Enterprise. I'm a huge fan of Voyager.
Yes.
By the time he shows up on Voyager, they do say almost what they say here on Lower Decks. "We read the reports about you. Everyone now is briefed about Q."
Mm-hmm.
I also would love to see more of him. I sincerely hope he makes an appearance in Picard. I was just thrilled to hear that it was definitely him before I ever checked the credits. He is just such an unmistakable voice. It was really a treat.
Oh, it was totally him. I didn't even need to check the credits. I was like, it's him, and he's got the soul of the character. It's awesome. Josh?
It was just adorable, because one, you could hear the joy in his voice. Two, we've seen him twice on I think just once on Deep Space Nine. It was the first season, and Sisko decked him. And
Picard never did that.
And he's like,
I'm not Picard.
I know. You hit me. Picard never hit me.
and then a bunch of times on Voyager,
including propositioning Janeway to make a child.
Yes. And then Q's son calls Janeway Aunt Kathy, right?
Yes, she becomes his godmother.
So well done. And the references that he makes with other episodes, the fact that they do the trial outfit again, the fact that the Captain Freeman's like, okay, I think he wants us to play chess or soccer, and then it's like, I have bigger puzzle. It's like, like they're so well done, and the fact that Mariner and company could just say, like, shoot him down, go like, no, walk away. We're going home. Like that. Just cool. Yeah, clearly labor of love, and you could just hear joy in his voice that he really seemed to be having a good time.
A lot of joy, a lot of fun, and hopefully the show will continue to be fun. It's been just a great ride so far. We are at an hour, or a little over an hour, so I think we'll call it a night. Josh, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you all for tuning in. Tonight I did have my classic Klingon, Geeky Tiki, because I wanted to celebrate the trial episode. And, I think the Klingon system of justice is the most similar to ours. And everyone, live long and prosper. Good night.